Tired. Let's finish this.
The next item is number 12, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 15-2640, block 1918, lot 51, 269 Washington Avenue, also known as 242 Hall Street in the Clinton Hill Historic District, a vacant lot. The application is to construct 2 new buildings, zoned R6B, and this was heard on February 18th, 2014.
Commissioners, good afternoon, Jared Nelson, Conservation Staff. So this is an application for new buildings that face Washington Avenue and Hall Street in the Hill Historic District. This application is in in February. You can see in front of you what this was the initial proposal, based on some concerns about its extension, and it's been set back the maximum allowable, and revisions have been made to this facade and to Hall Street. I'll just pass that over quickly.
Fine. Hearing open for Cass. Motion second. Thank you. Cass, just summarize the change you made and why you made them.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
I'm going to have Christopher take you through the design changes. There are a couple of commissioners who weren't here when we were here the last time, so I'm just going to quickly go back just to give you a little bit of context. Photographs particularly along Clinton Avenue and Washington Avenue, show larger scale, larger width avenues on the street. Back here. This is the frontage on Washington Avenue. We're dealing with a vacant lot on Washington Avenue and on Hall Street in the Clinton Hill Historic District. We looked at a variety of the residential type of buildings. This district, Clinton Hill Historic District, is largely a residential neighborhood that developed from the 1850s through the 1920s and 1930s. We drew inspiration from that variety of palette of building form, and I think what we've done is responded to your concerns about the articulation, particularly of the brickwork on Washington Avenue and Hall Street. I also want to just point out sort of the scale of some of these 4- and 6-story apartment buildings, typically with brick articulation on the upper floors and masonry on the base, and as well this feature, which we found sort of relevant in the discussion of this hyphen between our apartment block and the neighboring mansion building. This is a mansion building with this hyphen piece that actually belongs to the mansion, not so much to the later construction, but we thought it was actually informative where you have these sort of almost like infill structures in some of these gaps that find their way between these early mansions and these later row houses or apartment buildings. You also see larger gaps between these 19th century residential single-family houses and the multifamily apartment buildings elsewhere in the district. On Hall Street and in its context, sort of a different palette, we're looking at the articulation in particular of the buildings directly on either side, a carriage house on one side of the vacant lot and a parish house to the other side, and as well the way that the massing and organization of the facades are dealt with. And then finally, on windows, we've changed the window configuration from sort of a large multi-light configuration to a double hung. And there are numerous precedents for multi-light over single-light windows. This sort of unusual 3-light over 1, and then sort of a more traditional 9 or 6-light over 1. We draw inspiration from those elements as well. The massing largely stays the same, as Jared said. This piece, which was pushed forward to the plane of the apartment building on Washington Avenue, has now been pushed back its maximum that zoning allows, and is much more sort of deferential to the mansion. We've also added a lot of articulation to the brickwork on the Washington Avenue side, and modified the windows as well. Christopher can take you through the specific details. And then on Hall Street, similarly, we've changed the fenestration. This rendering with the lighting looks a little bit flat, but it has the same level of articulation, and we've added some as well, header courses, soldier courses in the field of the front facade. So we hope we've been responsive to your comments. And then on the rear elevation, this is what you saw previously. There were some comments, particularly on the back of the of the Washington Avenue side, sort of the organization and fenestration. You wanted to see something a little bit more regular. The materials still are brick, so there's a high degree of quality on the back. There's stucco on the back of these buildings, but the organization has been changed, and the fenestration now is a little bit more regular on Washington Avenue. The Hall Street side, the fenestration changes, but the organization is largely the same. With that, I'll have Christopher just take you through a couple of the relevant details. We'll see what moving.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Christopher here. with
second
S3
back,
Architecture. Thank you for seeing us today. The slide here is showing that, as Cass has described, we did push back what we call the connector piece from the 269 Washington Avenue building. It's 6 feet deep now and 8 feet wide, so it conforms to the core requirement of the building department. Sorry, in the zoning code. So we also open up much more visibility to the Henry Greenhouse at 275. Just some architectural line drawings. We wanted to just show you that we added more detailing with the brick with some of the coining on the ends instead of the overarching frame that you had seen in the previous design. Coining, header courses, precast, also a precast water table at the base. The penthouse and its bulkhead remain the same as you saw previously. The organization of the rear facades and the side facade showing the setback as well at the Henry McCoon House. The ins and outs of the detailing. Just the slide to show that we have worked out our interior layouts along the eastern edge for these units with the setback, so we still were able to maintain most of the bedroom count. The perspective as well with the penthouse has remained the same, no change there. We did push back on the terrace of the 4th floor, we pushed back the railing at our setback as well, so we really don't see anything from the street. And again, just a zoomed in view of that, expressing the 6/6, the 6/1 windows. The grouping remains the same, they're doubled along the sides and single in the middle. But we've been able to really open up the view to the mansion. So this is about a 6-foot setback here, 8 feet across, and then another 5 feet. And there you have it. You can't see anything of that railing up there. Just to show a little bit of analysis, in case anyone's wondering about that penthouse still, we did some line drawings showing as you walk down the street, the first view to the west. Looking back, the penthouse starts to appear. Then obviously at the church, you do see it. Going further to the east, you see the bulkhead and the penthouse appear only slightly, but we feel that with the streetscape and the different forms, it's fine. Line drawing, again, of Hall Street, nothing to report here. More detailing of the windows, again, the 6/1, precast pieces and soldier and header courses over the windows, as well as an exaggerated cornice with an additional soldier course. The plans stay the same as you saw last time. Nothing changed as well on the bulkhead or the penthouse. Just a closer in view showing the detailing of the brick. We do add, the coursing of the windows adds a little more interest. Pretty much the same. And then again, the penthouse analysis, just to show you that yes, this penthouse is visible over the carriage house next door, but as you go down the street to the other side, the church building blocks it. And
Okay. Questions, further questions? Yes,
Just
Cass.
wanted to make sure that you
Yeah.
move these, hand these around. These are
Yep.
material drawings.
Okay.
One of the
Yeah.
things that we've done is we've made sure that the brickwork has a lot of texture, both the brick itself and as well how it's used, so that it doesn't feel flat. Sometimes in renderings, it's sort of hard to get that, so we want to make sure you see sort of what the materials are and how they're going to be used on the facade.
Okay.
Front and the back.
That's right, so this is Hall Street, it's a combination of bricks and the base and then Washington Avenue.
Okay. Marjorie, discussion, are we ready? Okay.
I think
Yeah.
it was a very good project before, and these tweaks that, especially to deal with that little extra piece and the relationship to the mansion, I think was very important, and, yeah, I think it's actually an extremely good project, great detailing and texture on the brick.
I guess I'm not as enamored of it, but I think it is appropriate. I think that the rustication and details should return on the side exposures on the Washington Avenue building. And they should, at least hit the setback piece, and they should return from the setback and hit the brownstone. And I think that the precast detailing, I mean, they did it on the first application where they were cognizant of that corner being quite visible, and I think that this would only enhance that, and that should also carry forth on the side where the church is. I mean, they're very visible corners, and since you're going with a traditional design, traditional-ish, I think that the details should return. In terms of the Hall Street building, I think actually there the use of these neo-colonial windows feels for me out of place, and I would suggest that the applicant just stick with the original layout, which was more contemporary and seeming to me anyway more in keeping with the more contemporary design of that building. Otherwise, I think those can be handled at a staff level, and it's appropriate.
Fred?
Yeah, I agree. The pushback, I think my issue was the little plug piece, pushing it back. I wish zoning weren't so restrictive with regard to our needs here, because I think it should be pushed back, about 2 feet behind the McCoon house. But it's not fair for the applicant to now have to go to BSA for 6 months or something on that one issue. So I'm not going to press it further, but I'm just making the point. Yeah, I think all of this has been approvable, except for that piece of it for me. I'll just point out that the visible rooftop is not an addition, it's just part of the building, and I think it's okay to see pieces of buildings that stick up above a
Michael?
I can approve this as presented.
Okay, Joan?
I can approve it as presented.
All right.
I think it's really very, very nice and very nice quality, too.
Okay.
Yes, this is my first time I saw it, but I
Yeah.
can approve it as presented.
Roberta?
I think it's appropriate. I would like to them, if they can, to just look at that idea of doing the corners.
Continue the rustication, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, agreed, and close the hearing. Michael, would you do this, please? The hearing closed. Add your tweaks there for the staff.
Okay. Regarding 269 Washington Avenue, also known as 242 Hall Street in the Clinton Hill Historic District, the application is to construct 2 new buildings. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the construction of the new buildings will reestablish the street walls along Washington Avenue and Hall Street, that the massing and design of the development into 2 distinct buildings will allow the facades on each street to relate successfully to their respective streetscapes, that the height of both of the street wall facades will relate well to the character of each of their respective block fronts, that the general scale and massing of the building on Washington Avenue is consistent with the scale and massing of the eclectic building typologies on this street, that the overall composition and fenestration pattern on the Washington Avenue facade relates well to the scale, proportions, and material palette of the streetscape, that the setback from the adjacent church and lower vertical bay adjacent to the freestanding house will break down the scale of the building on this wide lot and will help it to defer to the adjacent buildings, that the height and placement of the lower vertical bay on Washington Avenue will preserve the cornice on the adjacent building and enhance the freestanding nature of the adjacent building, that the setback from the street and the perimeter garden fence will create a transition between the public and private space and are typical features of this portion of Washington Avenue, that the light-colored brick on Washington Avenue building will complement the variety of materials on this street, that the subtle shift in plane and pattern of the brickwork on the Washington Avenue facade will relate to the patterned brickwork and detailing found on the neighboring buildings, that the single and paired window openings will relate harmoniously with fenestration patterns found on the different buildings on Washington Avenue, that the details of the facade, including the entrance surround, window lintels, and sills on the Washington Avenue facade, will provide a level of articulation that is typical of the 19th to 20th century buildings on the street and will be a complementary counterpoint to the historic windows found on historic buildings in the streetscape, that the scale and massing of the new building on Hall Street and the articulation of the facade into 2 parts will mediate between the scale and massing of the carriage houses and apartment buildings on this street, that the brick and cast stone materials and dark brown metal windows windows, surrounds will relate to the predominant materials and finishes found on the buildings on both street elevations, that the single and paired multi-light windows will relate to the fenestration pattern found in both 19th century carriage houses and 20th century apartment buildings. The open court at the rear of the buildings maintains an open yard typically found between mansion buildings and carriage houses on the block, and that the top floor penthouses and stair bulkheads have been designed to be only minimally visible from a public thoroughfare, and the rooftop mechanical equipment will not be visible from a public thoroughfare. I also recommend that the corner detailing on the Washington Avenue building of coins and precast banding and modest projections be carried around to at all places where those walls are visible to the public, and that the windows on the Hall Street facade are not the 6/1s, but are, or do we do that, or should we not do that? Not
Well,
do that.
Before you decide, the applicants actually would prefer the previous window, so if it's okay with you.
I'm, whichever.
Yeah, it's fine. That's fine with me. Is that-
Well, they were like gridded.
No,
They
it's
were
like a
gridded.
Casement window.
That,
Show it.
it's that one right there, Joan. Right, that image right there on the top. That's the comparison. Yeah, to the left, closer to Michael.
This one here, on the left.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, done.
And that will do the gridded windows.
Second, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Approved, thank you.
Okay, the next item is actually comprised of 3 items that I'll read into the record simultaneously, and all 3 of them were read into the record on April 1st, 2014. Item number 13 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 15-2794, block 2121, lots 36, 37, 38, and 44, 370 to 374 Claremont Avenue in the Fort Greene Historic District, a vacant lot, and the application is to construct 3 row houses zoned R6B. The next is item number 14, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 15- I have to start again.